Thank you so much. Ooh, I already see some applause emojis. Maybe this is,
Wow.
I feel very validated by some of these emojis. It's just
Oh,
already it's
you're
off to a
very
great, there's a great communal feeling here. 91 participants, Becky.
It's insane.
Look at this. All right. So thank you everybody for joining us. Already seeing the beautiful face of my dear friend Rebecca Dinerstein Knight is filling me with joy, which is very much what I needed today. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask Becky to read the opening of this magical, bewitching, amazing novel. I'm then going to probably just say some things I feel about it because I have so many feelings about this book that I simply must share out loud from my living room to yours. And then we're going to discuss it for, maybe half an hour or so, and we'll take the questions at the end. So would you like to start us off with some HEX reading?
Yes. Um, Alex, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all of you. I can't believe this is happening. Um, the turnaround that every person who has been working on this book has performed in the last 3 weeks has been heroic. Viking, Penguin Random House, my publisher, took this book at the height of its logistical hurdle and got locked out of its office and has created this entire publication from home without missing a beat, without being given the opportunity to regroup, without having a day to reorganize. My editor, Allison Lorenzen, my publicist, Rebecca Marsh, my agent, Jennifer Adler, have just been 24 hours a day keeping this thing afloat, and I cannot express my gratitude that you guys are here tonight and that this event wasn't canceled and that it was moved and that Alex, you kept with it even in this new form. It's just this kind of support and agility this is the condition under which art can be made and can be shared, and it means the world to me. So thank you guys for being here. I will read the beginning of my book. It's short. The chapters in this book are short because I'd like it to be a pleasure. I'd like it to be a pleasure to read. So here we go. I am a woman who wakes up hungry. Tom touched only coffee till noon. You do what you're capable of at some point. So Tom and I left each other. I wanted breakfast, he wanted liberty, and who could blame either of us? I live alone now, in a large, rancid, blown-out loft in outer Red Hook, where I pad around the soft wood floors like a toddler. I've taken my pants off, my rings, earrings. It's quiet and bright. I haven't gotten any lamps. I can hardly move. I'm drunk, and I take a probiotic. My name is Nell Barber. I'm 5'5" and 130 pounds, which is not in any way remarkable. My daddy was a nice Jewish boy who married a nice Christian girl and raised me in Kansas and got on with it. Neither of them observed anything ever again. I was born observant. They gave me the original, fearful, organized minds of their childhoods and no religion of my own to honor. I suppose I turned from the celestial to the dirt. I study plants and I live in order. Just because Rachel Simons made sustained contact with thallium and absorbed its toxins through her potassium uptake channels and died, the university expelled all 6 members of our lab. They couldn't tolerate another ounce of our hazard. The disciplinary committee stood in choral formation and issued what sounded like whale tones run through a vocoder. Be gone, they groaned. Our experiment in toxicology had taken the life of a valued graduate student and would no longer be institutionally condoned. I wore a hazmat suit to the hearing to promise future caution. The chairman found this disrespectful, and I could hardly see his apoplectic face through the scratched plastic front of my second-hand helmet. Columbia couldn't accuse us. Rachel had oxidized the thallium of her own volition at her own risk and to her own demise. But it could close down the environment in which she'd endangered herself and rescind our school-wide welcome. We had broken the contract of care and common responsibility that characterized the Columbia student. If we couldn't study safely, we couldn't study. It made good sense, but it deleted me. The finalized verdict came via a specially assembled summer committee via priority mail to Tom's address, which I'd just kissed goodbye without any tongue. August is supposed to be a lazy month, but it pummeled my partnership and my PhD. The biggest loss is you, my chime, my floorboard. You are my night milk. You are my unison. You believe in the periodic table. Your book sold 8,000 copies in its first week. Columbia will separate you from the Simons case and nurture your celebrity. For 5 years, I have been your smaller self, your near peer, your sane challenger, your favorite. For 5 years, I've trailed as you approached success. Then Rachel reached for the rat poison and whole thing reached its readers, and my room lost its pillars in one coordinated catastrophe and neatly fell down. You and Tom have both conclusively shaken me. Look, Joan, I'm shaking. Tom and I lived in a rectangle of jewels, his mother's. A small palace they called an apartment on the Upper East Side, a good all-weather walk across Central Park to the university. Each morning I'd emerge from that snow globe and enter the open air feeling forward-moving and weightless. Each morning I'd be a beetle, creeping over the park's grass blades without bending them. So light was I. Now, when I step onto Van Brunt, my entire body weight rests on the sidewalk, but only and exactly my weight, not lifted, not burdened. I've returned to my skeleton's original fact. If you asked whether I'd like it, I think I'd tell you I do. When you climb out of something you're very deep inside, the daylight is first a blank, and then it reveals itself to be life as you knew it before you ever climbed into that thing. Everything else has come around. Against the huge solitude of my schoolwork came the romance of Tom. Against the romance of Tom came our utter lack of sex. Against our non-sexual partnership came our easy, childlike living together. Against our shared life, now, again, huge and unschooled solitude. How undercutting, how generous of the world to provide each thing with its inverse, to test each version of life we choose with a vision of its opposite. How perverse and unpeaceful. I want more than anything to love the choice I make. Love it with abandon, proudly, building a temple upon it. But how can you do it? How can you really give yourself up and praise anything when the world is too balanced to allow for a lopsided devotion, when each thing is always reckoning with its anti-self? Perhaps they're all the same, your various choices, and committing to one is the same as committing to any. Your only job is to build a temple. In memoriam to the temple torn down, to my years of studiously laid bricks kicked over, to a classmate and all her skin, I close the old books and open this one. These savage castor beans and monkshood seeds are no longer the lab's property. Rachel's experiment is now my own. I can destroy it or it can destroy me, as I please. I please. As with the old work, the new work is for you, Joan. What isn't for you? More life collected, documented. You'd like that, wouldn't you like that?
Thank you. So this is Nell Barber speaking. Nell Barber is the protagonist of HEX. She is a graduate student, or we should say a former graduate student, who has been kicked out of her program at Columbia will you explain briefly why she's been kicked out so that let's just establish some basic facts
Yes, yes,
so that I can
yes.
then go to the heart of what I want to ask you.
Sure.
You tell us.
Hi, Alex. Why has she been kicked out? It's a very specialized lab. There are 6 of them working to bind toxins to their own antidotes. And Rachel, her most advanced and accomplished classmate, has in her confidence in one moment exposed a piece of her wrist while wiping her nose and has made contact with a poison that winds up taking her life. And the university very promptly shuts the lab down. So all 6 members of the lab are dispersed, and none of them really care to keep up the work. But Nell, having seen the moment in which Rachel makes this error, becomes sort of fascinated and obsessed with it.
And I think it's fair to say that Nell is, in general, a pretty obsessive person.
Right.
Yes. So the first, actually, it's interesting just thinking about this, the hazards of doing something as small as touching your wrist to your nose, which when I first read HEX, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, did not occur to me. Now, of course, feels very, very urgent and communal. So the first thing that you notice about this book, and I remember, it's not extraordinary that I remember where I was when I started reading it because it was not that long ago, but still it was one of those, I'm going to remember where I stood while I read the opening of this book for a long time feelings. I was in the bagel shop, if anyone cares.
The best.
Yeah, the best. There is a tone in this book that is so forceful and striking and amazingly is sustained throughout. It's like holding a bow very, very taut, and we're always waiting for the moment when the finger is going to lift and the arrow is going to shoot off, which once we've all read the book, we can discuss when that moment comes, but let's not spoil it. Let's not spoil it for all amazing 108 of us who are here. But this tone is extraordinary. The way it's almost like there's an exceptional ease to it because we're dealing with someone who is very fluid in language, who's fluid in thinking, and who's pouring out all of her thoughts and feelings onto a page, onto a journal. And at the same time, there's something clinical about it. She's a scientist. She likes precision. She's exact. But also she's a poet. I don't know if she knows she's a poet. You're a poet. Does Nell know that she's a poet? How did you create this tone?
Wow, what a generous question. This tone burst forth in a fugue state over a couple of months in an artistic process I've never had before, and I don't think I'll have the luxury of having again anytime soon. Nell arrived fully formed. I would wake up and go to sleep in her voice. It helped that I was in total social isolation that was in 2017 voluntary, and now feels so distinct from the forced and terrifying isolation we're in now. I don't think I would dare to write this book anymore because it is so sensitive and alive in a way that while I was writing it in voluntary isolation in Hudson, New York 3 years ago, felt like a literary and aesthetic experiment in voice. And I think Nell knows that she has an attitude. And I think the honing of attitude can approach style. And I think style operates at the heart of poetry and at the heart of all verbal expression. So I don't think Nell would ever call herself a poet, but I think she is interested in her own style, which is not to say vanity, because she's a truly non-physical, non-material personality. But she likes to know herself, and she likes to speak, as you said, precisely according to her own instincts. So it was super fun to just let her occupy my mind, as I really didn't speak to anybody else for a period of about 6 months. I was just living alone, writing in Nell's voice, and I didn't have to dip in and out of her consciousness very much at all. It was the only thing I was thinking about and the only thing I was working on. And as a result, it feels very concentrated because I had the privilege of working with such focus on it.
Yeah, I mean, Nell herself is living in this situation of isolation. She's, as in the passage you just read, she and her boyfriend have just broken up. She's been kicked out of her lab. And Joan, the person to whom she is addressing her writing and her obsessive thoughts, is her mentor at Columbia. We'll come back to that in a second. But, first I just want to read this very intelligent question I came up with for you, which, let's just go to the big one here. It's botany. Why? How? This book is about a botanist. You, Rebecca Dinerstein, you're many things. You're not a botanist. I don't want anyone to believe for one second that I'm an idiot who thinks that people can only write what they know. They can't research, blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, I know this. I know that writing happens in many forms. Nonetheless, we're dealing with really specific forms of scientific inquiry and knowledge. And you were just playing them like every key on the piano, because of course, one thing that you get when you get science and when you get botany in particular is a richness of language that any writer, but particularly one who really began as a poet, as you did, can play with. So where does the interest in botany come from? And I'm also really interested in hearing how you began to research and explore this world.
Ooh. Ding, ding, ding. Is it okay? Is it working? Great. That's a really nice question. It started in 2012 when I had a summer job in a garden in Norway where the plants were labeled in either Latin or Norwegian. I didn't yet speak Norwegian and I had no idea what anything was. And more specifically, I had no idea what I could touch. And it dawned on me that human beings have been walking around this planet, and there's such a variety of extraordinary berries and plants and leaves. They're beautifully colored, they're very attractive, they're very tempting. Some of them nourish us. We need to pick some of them, we need to be harvesting some of them, and yet there are no signs. And I really began to wonder how mankind differentiated between what will harm us and what will nourish us. And that question started to look a lot like the questions that come up in dating, weirdly, which is that here is an attractive specimen. I see him on the tree. Is he going to feed me or really mess me up? And so I wanted to write a book in which the natural world, as it appears in both botany and in human relationships, sort of those distinctions disappear and it becomes just one web of attraction and danger and temptation and trial and error. But I very quickly realized that in order to take up the botany side of it, I had to do an enormous amount of research, as you say, because I didn't know the first thing. Grew up in New York City without any sort of outdoor space, and I didn't know anything about seeds or bulbs. I was given extraordinary counsel by various gardeners and horticulturalists who must have found the task incredibly odious because I didn't know the basics. So I had a sort of wonderful year interviewing botanists and gardeners and horticulturalists, and then also herbal experts and people who really practice witchcraft as a form of homeopathic and essential alchemy. There's a real network out there of resources, and admitting up front that I knew nothing and allowing them to educate me gave me a web of resources that really came together. But it was a major endeavor, the research side of it, and I had to bring that into it in order to be able to bring in the elements that came more easily to me, which were the human elements.
It's also this book is really learned, and it wears its learning really lightly. Like this is the book, as I was saying at the start, it's 200 pages long. It carries you through in this with an intensity of emotion and a voice in a way that really does to me just feel like a straight shot. And yet when I pause while reading it, it's like, oh, you're quoting a little Pushkin, you're quoting a little Byron, like we have a little Vita Sackville West. There are many, it's where is all of this coming from? Was this specific reading that you were doing for your book? Were these things that came, that sort of, should we continue with the plant metaphor? Should we try for one? Seeds that were planted in your mind that
Yeah,
suddenly sprouted under the raining of your, I can't go on, just, you know what I'm saying.
I do. Um, you know, a lot of the Pushkin and the Byron and a lot of especially the earlier quotes, I found coming up in the gardening materials, in the biology and plant life resources that I was studying. I found there's always been a link, especially between romantic poetry, between naturalism, between natural romanticism, and the natural world. I mean, that link is not new, and people have loved combining the art form with the science behind it for hundreds of years. And so it was sort of a pleasure to find the romantic poets that I had studied and loved reapplied in an arena that was so foreign to me, and that I could sort of navigate via these clues back to other fields that were more familiar. I never anticipated quoting Pushkin. Never quoted Pushkin before anywhere else, but it came up somehow. Yeah.
So Nell is someone who's attracted to danger. She's working with toxic plants that she has seen kill her lab mate and she knows can kill her. She is sort of severing her link with the outside world. She remains very close to her best friend, Mishti, and sort of ambiguously close to the ex-boyfriend who she had the sexless relationship with, Tom. And we'll bring in a few more characters in a second. She's absolutely obsessed with Joan, her mentor. Joan does not seem to return the strength of feeling or the feeling in kind. Why did you decide to put this mentor-student relationship at the heart of the novel? It's an interesting time to do it because, and you sort of lightly and very elegantly dance around Me Too questions, like what happens when there's an older man on campus who's interested in younger women students. But in this case, you have a female graduate student and you have her female superior. So where did this relationship come from?
Yeah, I think in much the same way that this book about toxins and antidotes was scheduled for release at the height of a pandemic, I started writing this book 10 days before the Harvey Weinstein story broke. And that issue of relationships in which power dynamics are confused for sexual dynamics, and one is nonetheless beholden to, interested in, swayed by a relationship that is not in its true essence erotic and nonetheless has to trade in that currency because it is the only currency that is recognized externally, became activated in a way I really couldn't have anticipated. And my interest in designing this cast of characters as a hexagon, as not simply a story of a couple or even of a love triangle, but really of a more complex geometry in which all 6 players have a relationship to all 6 players. And those relationships are not simply romantic, they're not simply sexual. They operate in terms of ambition and professional desire as much as romantic desire. The ways in which professional and academic desire become confused for sexual desire, it all clicked in that time as those stories were unfolding. And I'm really thankful that I was working right then and could get some of it written.
Can you describe a little more the structure of the book and how you did that? It's written, as you said at the start, in these really short chapters, which have a heading that usually is a playful, almost subject heading for what the chapter will discuss, but in ways that get at it in a very angular, slanted manner. And I almost started to think of it a little bit, as you say now, you're working with 6 characters. You have Nell at the heart. You have her obsession with Joan. You have her ex-boyfriend, Tom, who at some point becomes romantically involved with Joan. You have Joan's husband, who's a little bit of a sleaze on campus. You have Mishti, who's the gorgeous, super accomplished best friend of disaster Nell. You have Mishti's boyfriend, Carlo. You have all these characters. I sort of started to think of it like, when you braid a challah, which is not something I know how to do with any skill, and you're like, okay, this is my starting point. I'm going to go 3 over and 2 under to just keep track of all your strands. You have a challah basically. So
wow, great.
you didn't know it, but you had it. So how did you create this very complex structure?
You really asked the best questions.
Can you tell I've been watching bread baking tutorials like everyone else?
Me too. I just made a focaccia.
Right on.
Okay, writing this challah was the true pleasure of writing this book, and I will say the playful chapter titles were developed. Really saw how they were originally just the names of the 6 characters over and over again, and she really helped me bring out the joy in them, which is a big part of this book. I mean, for as involved as it is with Botany, it's also really interested in humor and pacing. So I'm glad that those chapter titles could morph away from the literal and I get going a little bit. But the structure of it, really the heart of it, and before I had any sense of who these characters were, I had 6 points on a diagram, A, B, C, D, and F, and arrows linking them, very truly 3 to the left and 1 to the right. I wanted to know what each 2-way arrow between each unit would consist of in order to understand the makeup of this algebra, for lack of a better word. I really wanted to work as an equation where each unit has a very distinct desire toward each other player, a very distinct thing to gain, a distinct thing to lose, and let those dynamics create the shape of the book. Because I really don't believe that our relationships are as simple as the categories that they're commonly placed under, which is essentially romantic or non-romantic. They each really want a lot from each other, even though only certain pairings wind up being sexual. So it was sort of wonderful to have these different strands and to be able to braid them out of order and to be able to say these 2 braids go back and forth on the side for a while, and then all of a sudden this guy's going to hop over to here and braid with this one for a little bit for totally different reasons, and to totally different effect. And I think just as a girl who went to math high school, it was a pleasure to operate in those terms, and leave and let the attitude start there, as opposed to trying to add the structure on top of it afterward. It was a real relief to start with the organization.
So was the organization pretty consistent from the start throughout? You had your map for yourself and you went through it?
Yes. I on October
really,
3rd, 2017.
As someone who leaves things to the last minute and just waits to see where I'm going to take myself, that's amazing to hear. Quite inspiring.
I've never had a creative experience like this. I sat down and I made this diagram in October of 2017, and I followed it for the next 6 months. And the writing obviously changed shape, and certain elements of those relationships unfolded, but the basic shape involved there was really set, and it was the anchor that allowed me to complete the project, for sure.
This is your 2nd novel, which is a notoriously difficult feat to pull off, having written 1, which already seems like the hardest thing in the world, to then sit back down and write a 2nd. What was your experience of the 2nd novel situation?
Ooh, the first novel took 6 years, and I started it from scratch 3 times, and I had no idea how to write a novel when I started writing it, and accordingly, it made no sense. My friend Julia is in this chat, and she and I turned in the first drafts of our first novels on the same day to the same workshop, and we brought in ice cream, and the teacher started the class like this. well, one of these books makes sense and the other doesn't. It was just like, oh no. And it took so long to figure out how to get from start to finish of a novel that many years later, when I started, I also took a good long time before I started writing the second one, which I think really helped. Many years later, having also consolidated that first novel into a screenplay, which was a major act of structural education. It was really, oh, Julia just said, thank God we had ice cream, but nobody ate the ice cream and we'll never know why.
It's typical. People feel exposed in that environment.
Even then, there was no sharing of goods. Um, at that point, by the time I started writing this, I had really gone through the ringer structurally. And so it was sort of a pleasure to just try again with a little bit more exercise or like experience under my belt, and take it easy and keep it short and keep it zesty and keep it a little bit just brisker than my experience had been with the first one.
Mm-hmm. I just want to signal to the other people in chat that we'll go, the two of us, for another few minutes, but if you have questions, I think this is right, just, put them in the chat and so we don't have to do that. One of the advantages of this format is we don't have to do the awkward thing at the end of the reading where everyone wonders if they should be the first to ask questions. If you just want to put questions into the chat, we'll make it very fluid. We'll go through them. It's just occurring to me as I sit here. So Becky and I have known each other for a long time, and I have read a lot of your writing over the years, which is a very privileged position to be in. And I think the first time we really seriously read each other's writing was in college in a class called Writing About Oneself. And I remember that one of the prompts for that class, and I didn't have to write on this prompt, I'm not sure if you did, but it was altered states. And this book really actually fits into an altered states prompt to some degree. Your character is writing under a degree of intense mental pressure. And I think that's one of the things that makes the book so piercing to read. You feel this pressure and you also feel this very sociable, bright persona tap dancing on top of it, but you understand that there's really, there's a scary depth beneath it. And this person's being driven to extremity. And you say that, when you were writing the book, you woke up thinking Nell Barber, you went to sleep thinking Nell Barber. Was that a disturbing place to be in? Was it pleasurable? What was that feeling like for you?
It was pleasurable because Nell's such a sass bucket. She's way punchier than I am, and we have very different personalities. And so it was really nice to just have permission to be a little bit zippy, a little zippier. So I enjoyed that, but the scary feeling what came in the research, honestly, because it became very clear, as you hear in the thallium section, how powerful the natural world is and how chemically reactive it is. And I don't trade in those extremities most of the time. Sunlit Night is about goats and flowers, and all of a sudden I was writing about serious toxins, which is just not my wheelhouse. So I loved being Nell, and I loved waking up in that voice every morning, but her world definitely caught me off guard, and that balance between the playfulness of Nell's persona and the material she's working with is really like the seesaw in the book. Yeah.
Should we look at some of the chat questions?
Sure.
What, if anything, are you currently reading? What is your favorite childhood book that brings you comfort? Comfort is a good thing to focus on now.
Such a good thing. I am currently reading a novel by an author who's in this chat, and I'm absolutely dazzled by it. It's Parakeet by Marie-Helene Bertino. I'm almost done. I finished most of it in one sitting. It's really exquisite, and talk about sassy. I mean, it's precise and it's mean and it's bright and quick and incisive, and I'm really, really loving it. And Marie will also have events canceled by this crisis, and I'm really excited for her book to receive the same support and encouragement that mine has. So Parakeet by Marie Helene Bertino. And my favorite childhood book that brings me comfort is Anne of Green Gables, which is probably everybody's favorite. I mean, I don't know. It's not an unusual choice, but I love it so much. Anne just loves so powerfully. She loves the apple tree, and she loves riding under the apple tree. And I think that was my first introduction to enthusiasm, which has clearly become a big part of my life. So yeah, Anne of Green Gables.
Okay, we have a question from Thessaly. What advice would you give to someone working on their novel?
Oh, how nice. Hi, Thessaly. I would advise to open it up, the document, every day. And
That is hard, man.
it's so hard. It's
Cruel
so
advice.
hard.
It's
But
good
it's
advice,
just,
but it's cruel advice.
I know, it's the worst. But if you have it in front of you every day, it's on your mind, and you don't slip into the neuroses of, it's been so long, I hate it, I can't look at it, I don't want to open it. It relieves you of some of the meta angst that can really seep in there. If it's just a routine and it's just a ritual, and then, at 9 a.m. every day you have a banana and then you open this thing, even if you don't get anywhere, I think the daily ritual of it really creates some forward movement. And then if you want to really, if you're on some sort of deadline and you really want to keep yourself on track, even saying like, I'm going to write 100 words every day. 100 words is less than a paragraph. But just some sort of daily count, I've always found, just like, I'm sorry, I'm hiccuping, keeps it moving, which is all you can really do. Like, I think the only difference is between finishing, like getting to the end of it or not. And if you do it every day, you'll stand a better chance of completing it, which is the thing. Thanks. Hi, Thessaly.
What was the most surprising thing you discovered in botany or writing this book?
So many herbs to cure flatulence. So many. Who knew it was such an issue? And then some really nice herbal associations, like cloves stop other people from gossiping about you, and really unpredictable, eccentric tidbits like that. There are some wonderful herbal almanacs that will really get you going in those directions.
Along those lines, some from Jin, some really fun scientific true detail / fun fact that didn't get to make it into the novel.
Wow. Gosh, Jen, there are so many. Wow, the cat.
Hi, cat.
Who's come to say hi.
So nice.
There are so many. There was something about the chemicals that can bend a spoon that I really wanted to get in there and didn't wind up making any sense. And there were a great number of there are a great number of herbs and flowers that I really wish I could have kept in just for their poetry alone, but I did wind up having to be selective, and I know that's not as specific as I'd like it to be, but let's go with spoon for now.
Spoon is good. Did you have like a little notebook that you kept all your facts in?
Yes.
Figures. All right, let me go back up to the next question. Do you think you'll adapt HEX for film?
Yes, I'm working on it. It's very dialogue based, so it really lends itself to a screenplay format. Yeah.
Were you thinking of that when you were writing the dialogue?
Yeah.
I guess your experience writing the screenplay for Sunlit Night would really, come into that.
I was in the middle of sort of editing the Sunlit Night screenplay while I was approaching this, so it feels like a screenplay to me already. Yeah.
All right, we have an important literary question. Cute shirt, and where did you get it?
Please. Hi, Eden. Thank you so much. It's Rachel Antonoff, who is a really lovely, lovely soul, and she's been very supportive of this book. So I'm very excited to be wearing Rachel Antonoff's dress tonight. Thank you.
When you're writing novels, do you read other novels or keep your reading focused on the research? If you read novels, how do you keep from adopting the voice of whatever you're reading while still remaining open and porous to inspiration? That's a great question.
Cool question. Yes, I read other novels, but very, very particular ones, and ones that I felt nourished the tone of the book, which is there are so many wonderful books in all varieties of attitudes that if you're able to find one that vibes with the sort of voice that you're in, it can be incredibly productive. So I was reading Fleur Jiggy's Sweet Days of Discipline, which was incredibly energizing. And I was reading a lot of Grace Paley, who will just sock it to you in the way that will wake you up in the morning. Those Grace Paley was short stories, not novels, but it was all voice, and I really treasured it. So I think allowing voices that are harmonious with yours in is really constructive. Yeah.
That's so cool. Grace, I can really hear Grace Paley now that you say
Yeah,
that.
so
Short little zips that take you in a totally different direction than you expected to be going in.
Yes, punch you in the face.
Yeah, exactly. But in a fun way.
Yes.
How did you think about writing place in the book? Are there writers or works that inspired or shaped the geography of the novel?
Hi, Pat. You know what was so nice about this book is that place took a backseat. Sunlit Night was about Norway. My poems are about Norway. And I wanted this book to be about personas. So I set it in New York, which is the most natural and obvious. Like to me, it comes so fluently that, or without thinking, that I could walk the streets without looking at them. So it was really nice to have a city that was available to me that I didn't have to shed a deliberate light on. Are there writers or works that inspired the geography of the novel? I mean, all the great writing, all the great city writing, it's a wonderful tradition, but I think the examples that really inspired this book were more voice-based.
Talk about whether or not you consulted any witches for this book. Why or why not?
So on Main Street in Hudson, New York, there's a shop that calls itself something along the lines of the Witch Depot, and it's very sincere. And you go in and you can buy, there are a couple of people in this chat who went with me to this store. You can buy sandalwood to burn and certain essences and certain flammable goods. And I was intimidated, underqualified, and really out of my element. So we sort of walked in and walked out. We did get some candles that made their way into the novel, but Mishti sort of sneezes on them. They're sort of hack candles, ultimately, which is not to say that the witch store, Julie Bunton says the witch store also sold tinctures. That's true. We did get a tincture.
The witch store.
What?
Well, it's a witch store. It has to sell.
Exactly. They had a wide variety of tinctures, and we did put those tinctures on our tongues.
And did they produce any results?
Julie, what do you think? I think we thought they did, but it's hard, still waiting, Julie
Still
says.
waiting.
Yeah, verdict is out.
Okay. Yeah. You never know.
No, you really don't. All right, well, as the questions are winding down, I just want to thank everybody again, and especially you, Alex. You've been the most expert and eloquent and generous and kind conversation partner, and I love talking to you. So thank you so much.
That feeling is very mutual.
And I see Books Are Magic has just posted the link to HEX again. Books Are Magic is doing incredible work fulfilling orders from virtually right now. If you would like to buy the book, they're a great place to buy it from. So there's the link. And I I don't know. I'm really, really grateful. So thank you guys all so much for being here tonight.
And those of you who have not yet read HEX have such a treat ahead of you. It is a totally transporting, mind-altering novel. So I'm excited for all those who have not yet read it to discover it.